I'd like to get right onto my topic, common pitfalls in designing task-based language teaching, AI connecting the dots that humans cannot. So this is my abstract. I'm not going to go over it. It's not necessary. Instead, I'm just going to give you a very quick roadmap. I'll be talking about task-based language teaching, or TBLT for short. I will also talk about large language models, but ultimately, I want to talk about how we can actually bring the two together to help us solve some real-world problems. Before I begin, I'd like to offer a little off-ramp. Some of the things that I'll be mentioning might sound a little technical to some of you. Therefore, I have something that I want to share with you. If you're interested in what I'm talking about, if there are things you don't quite understand, I invite you to check out 2 professional development programs that are offered out of my Center for International Foreign Language Teacher Education at Teachers College, Columbia University, where you learn about these things in depth. So, task-based language instruction. This has been a buzzword for a number of decades. There's not just one version of task-based instruction, there are multiple versions, at least 3. Task-supported instruction, task-referenced teaching or instruction, and task-based language teaching. So all of them use tasks in one way or another to either drive language teaching or support language teaching. And they all subscribe to that definition of what a task is. So let's have a look. A task is a holistic activity which engages language use in order to achieve some non-linguistic outcome while meeting a linguistic challenge, with the overall aim of promoting language learning through process or product or both. For the remainder of my keynote, I'm going to focus on just that version of task-based instruction. It's called task-based language teaching. And very often it is known as TBLT, task-based language teaching. So TBLT is a cutting-edge pedagogy. It is the only pedagogy that's research-based, so we refer to it as a research pedagogy. The goal of teaching and learning for TBLT is to develop learners' functional competence, a kind of communicative competence or kind of competence that's usable in the real world. To develop learners' knowledge of language, not about language. There's a big difference between knowledge about language and knowledge of language. The goal of TBLT is to develop a learner's knowledge of language. And the goal is also partly to promote the development of implicit knowledge more than explicit knowledge. And as a research pedagogy, TBLT draws on a lot of strengths of SLA research, among others, the research on the role of input in second language development, the role of interaction and negotiation in second language development, the role of feedback, and the role of output production. And the need, based on second language acquisition research, to respect individual learners' internal syllabus or program of learning or built-in syllabus. From a second language acquisition research perspective, teaching, whether you do TBLT or some other type of teaching, it is about facilitating learning, about providing conditions conducive to learning. Let's break down TBLT just for a little bit to get a slightly deeper understanding of what TBLT is. So here I'm using a framework proposed by Richards and Rogers in 1988. This framework allows us to systematically understand what is entailed in a particular teaching approach. According to this framework, there are 3 levels at which we can examine a particular approach. So I'm using this now to help us understand what's in TBLT. So the 3 levels are approach, design, and procedure. The approach level speaks to theoretical assumptions about what language is and what language acquisition is about. So for TBLT, the assumption is language is a tool for communication. And learning a language comes down to learning how to use the language. At the next level, which is called design, this is a level where planning takes place. Teachers need to develop syllabi and lesson plans and instructional materials. So at this next level, TBLT requires a particular type of syllabus that features psycholinguistically sequenced communicative tasks. And then the next level, which is called procedure, and that's the level of classroom teaching. At that level, if we walk into a TBLT classroom, what we see is that teachers and learners engage in tasks, communicative tasks. So in a nutshell, what is TBLT? It is about using communicative tasks, carefully sequenced, psycholinguistically sequenced communicative tasks to drive teaching, learning, and assessment. And last but not least, TBLT seeks to achieve 2 kinds of validity. One is called ecological validity, meaning TBLT reflects how language is used in the real world. And there's another type of validity that TBLT seeks to achieve, which is often absent in other kinds of pedagogies. And that is a psycholinguistic validity. It provides conditions that facilitate, that support language learning done by individual learners. Right? So as a research pedagogy, as I have mentioned, TBLT draws on second language acquisition research. One of the things that TBLT draws on is findings from SLA research that suggest that language acquisition is not all challenging or difficult, but there are things that are very, very challenging. And TBLT draws on that insight. Rather than teaching everything, which is not going to be possible, practically speaking, it aims at teaching things selectively, focusing on things that are acquisitionally challenging. So for the sake of illustration, I'm going to zoom in on one particular challenge which has been well documented in second language acquisition research. Longitudinal research, for example, has established that the English plural S poses a persistent universal challenge for late L2 learners. So by late L2 learners, I refer to those learners who start learning another language after or near the closure of the critical period. All right, so speaking of the English plural as, this is just a quick view of what's entailed in the use of the English plural as. By the way, I'm using the English plural as an example to illustrate how we can actually juxtapose AI and then pedagogical strategies to facilitate learning. Much of what I'm talking about, in fact, applies to the teaching of Chinese. So for example, I was reflecting on the classroom observation from yesterday, 课周求见。所以我现在讲的这个很多就是把这个课周求见的那个课都可以通过这种方法来做，做成 task-based. Okay? So back to the acquisitional challenge, the English plural S. Plural marking in English is semantically productive and pragmatically flexible. It signals not only number, but also variety, generality, collectivity, and abstraction. It operates across lexical, syntactic, and discourse pragmatic levels, forming one of the most multifunctional inflectional systems in English. So as you can tell, it's a very complex system. Just like the plural S, when to use it, when not to use it. It's very complex. So let's just assume that we use the traditional approach to teaching the English plural S, and this is what the lesson plan pretty much looks like. Okay? If you look at the objectives, recognizing the plural marker, form regular plurals by adding S to countdowns, etc., etc. And then there's a warm-up, and there's a presentation of the rule, and there's a guided practice, there's a focused production, and then there's a review. In a nutshell, this whole lesson revolves a lot around manipulating the surface features of the plural S, the forms. And look at the students in this kind of classroom, they're not happy. They're not happy because being taught that way, there's no way they can actually acquire the English plural S. Comparing that with a task-based teaching approach, look at the roadmap here, starting with the goal. The goal is to use plural nouns in real-life contexts, such as shopping, describing items, and so on and so forth. And then you have task, right? Plan a party by completing a shopping list in pairs and so on and so forth. And then procedure, there's a pre-task, there's a task, and there's a post-task. After that, there's a language focus. And the expected outcome is that learners are able to communicate meaningfully, notice, and use the plurals accurately. And students are happy. If they're taught this way, they're hopeful that they can acquire the English plural S. All right, so fast forwarding. TBLT has been around in our field for many decades. For as long as the field of second language acquisition has existed, there's a vast literature out there. I'm just showing a few books, including a journal called Task. There's a lot of research into TBLT. Several decades of research, several decades of practice have made apparent there's some bottlenecks. And those bottlenecks have been around for decades as well. We're not seeing much progress there. So there are three sets of bottlenecks. There's one set in relation to the practice, the actual doing of TBLT. There's another set of bottlenecks connected to the research on TBLT, and there's yet another one speaking to the interface between research and practice. In the interest of time, I'm going to just focus on the bottlenecks confronting the doing of TBLT just for this conference. So practicing TBLT. Practicing TBLT, just like practicing any other type of teaching, comprises two phases, planning and implementation. And here, again, in the interest of time, I'm going to focus on the bottlenecks associated with the planning for TBLT. Thinking about the planning for TBLT, there are a lot of considerations that need to take place, such as developing a TBLT syllabus and lesson plans, thinking about the task design and sequencing, how to sequence the tasks, thinking about tasks as well as attention to language, which we call focus on form, and thinking about a very complex construct called complexity. What is complexity? Related to that, what is difficulty? How do we differentiate between complexity and difficulty? So, bottlenecks and challenges in relation to the doing of TBLT, more specifically to the planning for TBLT. Some of the bottlenecks we have seen include lack of input-based tasks, lack of scaffolding tasks, lack of systematic tasks, and lack of alignment of communicative and linguistic goals. Lack of longer-term planning. Very often we see teachers using tasks in the classroom, but it's just like a one-off event, one task here, one task there. We haven't seen much evidence of longer-term planning for TBLT. Lack of scaling. So typically the practices have a very narrow scope. Lack of scaling. Lack of a systematic implementation of TBLT. And TBLT for beginners. Many teachers think TBLT is only for intermediate learners. So learners need to have already had some proficiency before they can be introduced to TBLT, and that's a misconception. TBLT is for everybody, for beginners, for intermediate, for advanced learners, for young learners, for older learners, for adolescent learners. And TBLT materials production is a huge challenge. Many teachers, after professional development, get excited about TBLT, wanting to do it in their classrooms, and yet they're deterred by the prospect of spending a lot of time producing TBLT materials, because TBLT is learner-centered. There isn't a textbook out there that you can actually use, and then you do it in a TBLT way. So it doesn't work like that. If you want to do TBLT, your point of departure is a good understanding of who your students are, what their needs are, and based on that, you create materials. And you present them, you turn those into tasks, learning opportunities, instructional opportunities. So for all these challenges, I'm here very quickly citing an article by Swan, sorry, there's a typo, it's not Swan, Michael Swan from 2005. And in that article, Swan criticized TBLT, citing the challenges confronting the implementation of TBLT in contexts where students and teachers are so used to thinking about language as a system of structures. So questioning the practicality of TBLT. But Swan also questioned the affordances that TBLT generates for learners to learn the language itself. But there are also counter arguments there. For example, one of the pioneers of TBLT, I'm citing Long 2016, and Long wrote an article called In Defense of Tasks that TBLT, non-issues are real issues. So for Long, some of the issues brought by Swan are actually non-issues, but there are some real issues that we need to wrestle with. Okay? And here I'm citing a line from a more recent publication, and this is from Michael Martin East, who said, TBLT may have the support of theorists and researchers, but it remains at the level of the classroom a contested endeavor. And what that means is, there's more we need to look into when it comes to task-based language teaching. So we're going to hold on to the bottlenecks because later on we're going to circle back to the bottlenecks and see to what extent we can leverage AI to help us resolve some of the bottlenecks. So for now, let's just look around us at the context here. AI is driving everything and it's everywhere. Humanity has entered an age of AI revolution on par with the Industrial Revolution, only more consequential. It would not be a stretch, as some say, to describe a period of hyperactive growth in the tech industry as a historic moment, and we're in that moment as we speak. So a few pictures to illustrate what's happening around us, the building of large data centers. Countries are rushed into that kind of undertaking. So it's happening all around us. But for the purpose of this conference, let's zoom in on a type of artificial intelligence called a generative artificial intelligence, which is otherwise known as large language models. Okay? Large language models are highly relevant to foreign language learning, teaching, and research. General purpose chatbots, large language models, chatbots like DeepSeek, ChatGPT, Grok, Cloud, and so on, right? General purpose chatbots are not made for applied linguistics. They're not made for language teaching, but they can be co-opted for it. They can be repurposed productively. Chatbots are a form of reactive AI. Reactive AI because when you interact with a chatbot, you need to prompt the chatbot, and the chatbot will then react to your prompt. So in that sense, Gen AI is reactive. And chatbots don't act on their own, okay? There's something we always need to keep in mind as we talk about AI. It is a double-edged sword. Wielding this sword with good intent unlocks superpower. Wielding it carelessly risks self-sabotage. Wielding it maliciously threatens everybody. So let's keep that in mind. It's a double-edged sword. One thing that we are aware of is that AI, including Gen AI, is developing very, very rapidly. Take ChatGPT as an example. We have seen rapid advancement of its capabilities. So see the different versions, different models there. And we see rapid technological refinement of its capabilities. ChatGPT, as an example, seems to be more reliable and is more versatile. And it's becoming more domain specific. And we like that, right? And the chatbots like ChatGPT has been adopted across a number of sectors. And here I have highlighted education because that's what concerns us. Education, business, programming, research, and creative fields. And there is, so what we're seeing right now is a virtual circle of technological advancement on the one hand and rapid diffusion rapid diffusion of the chatbot and its various functionalities. Okay, so let's ask ourselves a more pertinent question: what's the relevance of large language models to TBLT, and how can large language models support TBLT? So with that, we now again come back to the theme of this keynote: AI connecting the dots that humans cannot. Okay, the bottlenecks. Remember the bottlenecks that I mentioned earlier? Let's see if we can put the two together, the bottlenecks and also AI, okay? So what we would like to look into is the possibility of forging some kind of a human-AI alliance in TBLT by, for example, instructing AI or ChatGPT or DeepSeek or any other large language model to produce tasks that can be used in TBLT. All right, so with the current version of ChatGPT, doing that, producing tasks, seems to be very easy. ChatGPT gives you a task, a design, a description, within no time. It's very efficient. So here's one example. It's a product from ChatGPT. Ask ChatGPT to produce a task and a lesson plan, essentially. So here you can see task-based lesson plan, shopping for a party, and this lesson plan is for beginners. Remember, that's a bottleneck. TBLT for beginners has been taken to be, by many people, to be impossible because the learners won't be able to do the tasks. That's not true. So you can actually ask ChatGPT for help, and ChatGPT can produce a lesson plan that would work for beginners. Okay, so that's one bottleneck, TBLT for beginners. Okay, large language models are capable of leveling the teaching and learning materials to different proficiency levels. It has that capacity. ChatGPT has that capacity. Other large language models have that capacity as well, developing materials for different learners at different proficiency levels. Okay? And not only that, ChatGPT can do things that humans probably either cannot do or take a very long time to do, yet with unsatisfactory results. So here you can instruct ChatGPT to give you a longer term course in TBLT. From the example you can see, again, within just a few seconds, ChatGPT can give you 20 lessons, not just one lesson, but 20 lessons spanning perhaps the entire semester or perhaps longer. Okay, now each of the lessons follows the TBLT cycle that begins with a pre-task, context plus input, and then task, communicative problem solving or decision making, and then next, Planning, students plan, opportunities for students to plan and report on their findings. So sharing results. And finally, there's a language focus. Reflection and form awareness. Students and teachers work together to actually reflect on the language use. Okay, so here we have another bottleneck and we have a solution. TBLT, lack of long-term planning. So this gives you long-term planning. Okay? But we need to do more in forging that alliance between human instructors and AI in TBLT. Okay? We need to do more. The instructors still have a role to play. The instructors need to continue to interact with ChatGPT to fine-tune the outcome or the output of ChatGPT. Fine-tuning. In other words, in this alliance, the human-AI alliance, there is a critical role for human instructors, for human experts to intervene in that process. Because TBLT, at the end of the day, is learner-centered. It needs to be built on learners' communicative needs, learning needs, and it seeks to develop functional competency in learners, and it has ecological validity, and TBLT also needs to have a psycholinguistic validity. All right, in the interest of time, I'm going to focus on the psycholinguistic validity of tasks. Again, using AI to help us with that, right? So what we can do is we can continue to interact with ChatGPT or any other large language model to actually help us assess the psycholinguistic ability of the tasks generated by AI. In this case, you see an example of the ChatGPT analyzing a psycholinguistic construct called task complexity. And once again, this process is very efficient. In just a few seconds, ChatGPT produces the output that gives you a very comprehensive view of what is entailed in task complexity. And not only that, I was blown away by the fact that ChatGPT was actually very, very current in the sense that it drew on current theories of second language acquisition. In this case, when evaluating task complexity, ChatGPT drew on Robinson's model, it drew on Skian's model. Both are the major models in discussions on task complexity. And there's more you can do. Really, the potential is infinite. You can continue to interact with ChatGPT still on that issue of psycholinguistic ability because that's what determines how learning is going to take place, right? So that is a very important piece. In this case, we can zoom in on the specific psycholinguistic conditions such as input, negotiation, output, and feedback. And ChatGPT produces this image or this chart that tells you whether this task is okay in terms of input or whether it falls short in terms of output or negotiation and so on. And ChatGPT can actually analyze multiple tasks, not just one task, multiple tasks. And this would allow you to actually compare several tasks at one time in terms of the psycholinguistic conditions. In doing TBLT, determining the goal is not always easy. And let me just give you one piece of evidence here. I'm drawing on a table from a big writer in the domain of task-based language teaching, Rod Ellis. Rod Ellis provides this table as a framework for describing tasks. Okay, let's zoom in on the goal. If we have time, we can actually look at the descriptor of the goal carefully. And if we do that, we realize that, oh, this is actually not really TBLT, because the goal is grammar-based. It's structural. It's not communicative. So that shows how challenging it is to actually come up with goals that would serve TBLT. So here's another bottleneck: coupling communicative and linguistic goals and designing task-based language teaching, right? So look at what we can do and what ChatGPT can do. So this is a piece of output produced by ChatGPT, a lesson plan that describes how a task is done. But for the focus of the current discussion, let's zoom in on the goals, the objectives description. So as you can see there, it's something I would call a hodgepodge of things. It is a little bit of this, it's a little of that, it's all over the place. So as a human instructor, I'm not happy with that. So I asked ChatGPT to revise the goals. And here's what ChatGPT does. Look at that. Both. This time, both communicative goals and linguistic goals. Okay? All right. And ChatGPT really can do a lot of things, right? So back to the psycholinguistic dimensions of the tasks. So here we can have ChatGPT give us a map of the psycholinguistic conditions pertinent to the 20 units for TBLT. And this is what it produced. All right, let's zoom in on the first 5 units. What do we see? Okay, if we look horizontally, we see, first of all, in the first column, the themes, the tasks, and the next column, input, the next one, negotiation, the next one, feedback, the next one, output. Look what we see there. Okay, And let me focus your attention on that column for input. What do you see? Low, 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 low. And that's not good. That's not good, because if we teach TBLT to beginners, input is critical. Input matters more than anything else. We need to generate more input-based tasks. So, again, we go back to ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT to revise its earlier output by introducing more input-based tasks. Okay, so if you, this one, there's no pointer, never mind. Okay, so you see in that table, you see the juxtaposition of the original input condition and the revised input condition, and also in the last column, a change summary. And over here, notice how specific, how elaborate ChatGPT can be about the design features in terms of input-based tasks. You see here in the first column that's been highlighted for you, the dimensions like a quantity of input, variety of input, authenticity, processing depth, and role of input, right, for all these lessons. First 5 lessons, second, and so on and so forth. The revised lessons, original lessons, so you can see the changes. All right, with that, let's come to yet another bottleneck. Lack of systematic tasks. Again, ChatGPT can help us a lot in producing systematic tasks. And here you can see a summary of psycholinguistic development. Early lessons, first 5, second 5, and the next 5, and so on and so forth. And in terms of the psycholinguistic conditions in the first column, you can see a progression, a good progression, going from the earlier lessons to the later lessons. So, leveraging large language models, there's a lot of potential there, helping us in doing effective foreign language teaching and learning, specifically with producing TBLT materials production. Okay, efficiency, very efficient. Okay, removing bottlenecks. Large language models can help us remove some of the long-standing bottlenecks in TBLT, enabling systematic TBLT, coupling ecological validity with psycholinguistic validity. That's actually the hardest in foreign language teaching. Okay. Enabling longer-term development through TBLT scaling. There's infinite potential. Infinite potential, technological improvement, broader functionality, wider appeal, large user base, more tests, more data, and better models, and improvement. So this is happening constantly. Okay, it's a cycle, it's a recycle, it's a dynamic. So this is happening. This is why we see ChatGPT or large language models perform better and better. Okay, at the heart of this cycle is this thing called a human AI feedback loop. And forming this loop are the user of AI and AI itself, the technology itself, right? So there's a feedback back and forth, right? AI response, human input, and between them, they form an ecosystem. They form a co-adaptive system, and as a result of this system, we see accelerating AI, learning, elevating human performance, creating exponential human growth, grounding AI in human meaning and values, rewriting what human expertise looks like, shaping the direction of the AI revolution itself. So we're part of this process. And many of you who have had experience using large language models, including ChatGPT, might notice that at each sort of interactional episode, you see a little thing there, thumbs up, thumbs down. Don't underestimate that. If you actually click on one of them, you're giving feedback to AI. And that feedback helps AI improve. So teachers, students, and researchers should actively explore the vast potential of generative AI in elevating their real-world endeavors, including doing effective TBLT. And the goal should be to optimize human-AI alliance. And doing that requires human instructors to have deep knowledge and skills. And the role of a human expert is to train AI to evaluate AI output and to fine-tune AI output with a human instructor and the AI tool as co-designers for TBLT. And this alliance can steer AI where the human instructor wanted to go, right? At the heart of all of this is professional development. Teacher professional development is key. Okay, so once again, we're looking at the opportunities for professional development where you can learn about these things. At Teachers College since 2018 or earlier, we've been providing professional development programs in which we train participants in TBLT and now integration of TBLT and AI. What's more important is that we have research evidence to back up our approach to doing that. And here's one sample publication which came out in 2018, Task-Based Learning and Task-Based Teaching, Training Teachers of Chinese as a Foreign Language. And there's a more recent one, 2023, which came out in Frontiers in Psychology. The title of the research is English Medium Instruction. You can walk and chew gum. Okay, am I doing okay time-wise? I think so, right? I'm fine. Okay, all right, so here I would like just to take a few minutes to show some sample work from our professional development programs. And here we have 3 participants forming a group to work on a project, a capstone project that requires TBLT, the integration of TBLT with AI, more specifically to learn to adapt a traditional Chinese teaching textbook to a task-based approach to teaching Chinese. Okay, so this particular group decided